Why didn't this record? I apologize. But hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today, I was going to be showing you guys the sketching portion, but none of it recorded. I even at this point already lightened my sketch in preparation for the coloring session. So unfortunately, the sketch is probably a little bit hard to see. So the sketch is done with the Pilor Color ENO in the color red. Ended up lightening the sketch, like I mentioned earlier, with the kneaded eraser so that we can do a little bit of inking prior to doing our coloring for today. So I'm opening up my swatch book and we are going to pick out a line art color, and I'm looking at mostly just my Magicfly dual tip markers as they have like a fine liner side and a brush tip size, and there's like a plethora of colors that I find that work really well with whenever I want to do a little bit of line work or want to use line work for something that requires me to color over it. Now, just to preface, these are water-based markers, so I don't recommend doing line art prior to adding color with like any sort of like wet watery medium. So for me, I am going to be using alcohol markers, and because these ones are water based, I found that the alcohol markers don't really budge the lines, which is really nice. I don't find any really like smudging or bleeding, so I like to use these markers whenever I have to use alcohol markers as well. So we're going to start off with kind of like a mid-tone-ish kind of orange color, and then later on I'm going to darken up and kind of like pull more contrast from my line work after we do our shading and coloring with the alcohol markers. Then that way I can kind of like pick and choose where I want to add contrast, as well as just like find areas that need a little bit more of that push. So because of that, I like to start off with a color that's like much more on the lighter side. Sometimes like I like to match it to the overall color scheme of the character or whatever I'm drawing, but in this case I wanted to leave it more towards like orange just to give the face a little bit more warmth this time. So I don't think I've actually done an alcohol marker drawing in a long time, and I definitely haven't done one in this particular sketchbook. So I think I've kind of like briefly talked about this. Oftentimes that I've worked in my sketchbook, I'm very familiar with what mediums work well or how they're going to behave on the paper, but because I'm using a sketchbook that is not like my usual notebook that like I treat as a sketchbook, I actually don't remember how this kind of paper reacts with alcohol markers, and I didn't really do any testing prior, so I'm kind of going in this a little bit blind, but I'm sure it was gonna turn out okay enough that I wasn't gonna scrap it, which is why I am spending even a decent amount of time on the sketching portion as well as the line arting before we even jump into the colors. Now, I forgot to talk about who or what I'm drawing. So around the time of when I think Genshin has a Duolingo collaboration, they released some promo art, and I think it was like a little video, and it was really cute because they have both Tighnari, which is the person I'm drawing right now, and Saino, and they have both really cute outfits that are more like scholar, kind of like bookwormy, academic-ish kind of esque type aesthetic. So I really liked it, and Tighnari was one of my favorite characters just in general for Genshin, both visually and just like his character type. So I wanted to draw him for today, and I think it's kind of obvious, I'm a little bit weak to characters that have glasses or accessorize with glasses, so I did not want to miss this opportunity of drawing him with glasses this time. So that is what we are going to be drawing. I think the color scheme is also pretty simple, especially because I kept it as the typical kind of like headshot, so we're not going to be focusing too much on the exact like colors of the outfit per se. But I think for the most part, we're just going to be finishing up the line work first. I tried my best to add some line width variation, adding a little bit of depth here and there for the line art prior to doing any of the coloring. I think most of it is just like personal preference. We are going to be darkening a lot of them later with a darker marker color for the line work. But at this point, I went ahead and also lighten up the sketch even more, and then we can actually start off with our coloring. So I am using the Ohuhu marker set, or Ohuhu 320. I forget what series it is, but it is the alcohol marker set that they have. I used a lot of the skin tone markers because I draw a lot of the characters more often, especially like the fairer skin tones. So I'm going to be pulling some markers from the Copic marker set that I've gotten, I think earlier this year, if not it was like late last year. I think it was pretty much like at the very beginning of this year. So because they do have a skin tone set, I am using some of the colors from that to do the skin. And I feel a little bit more comfortable doing that because I am aware that Copic has refills for all of their colors. I need to look into whether or not Ohuhu has like the refills for the colors that I'm looking for. I know they have refills for like certain colors, but not like their full range. So I think that's like one thing I'm always very particular about when it comes to like traditional mediums, and why I gravitate towards wanting to color illustrations typically with watercolors, or I guess like sometimes with gouache, but watercolor like pans or paints a little goes a long way. And I find that you can mix up so many different colors from a very small palette. But when it comes to like, let's say markers, you rely on the amount of ink that's left in the barrel. And if there's no refill, then you can't really reuse the marker again per se. So watercolor, I find you get a lot more mileage out of it. But obviously there's like drawbacks of both, which I won't get into right now. But right now, we did the skin, and then I will go ahead and work on some other areas. I did not push the skin as like deep, especially on this first go around. I think once I added a little bit more colors and values towards his hair, then I can push the skin a little bit more, because I was scared to go too dark too quickly and making things look too muddy and making it look a little bit unnecessarily saturated or too dark for this piece. So I was being a little bit timid, and I went back to an area that I felt a little bit more comfortable with, which happens to be the, I guess, like white clothing, or areas that can absorb a lot of like different colors per se. So for white, I like adding like a lot of warm and cool colors to kind of, you know, give it a little bit more of a colorful appearance without getting rid of the essence of like the object being white. But also I don't want it to lean too much like too cool or too warm if I'm leaving everything like fairly neutral. But I do like a little bit more of like that colorful look. So I wanted to, you know, add a little bit of that skin tone color into the glove, as well as like a little bit more of like a vibrant blue. We neutralize everything with kind of like a dustier purple. And then after that, we moved on to eyes and glasses. So one thing about Tighnari's design, I like his eyes, like the fact that he has kind of like the dual tone color of brown on the top and then green on the bottom, but they are very much like very simple. So I don't really like to mess around with his eyes too much. I think one thing I struggle with sometimes is the fact that like if a character has like a very unique eye design, I guess, like the iris itself, maybe the pupil is also a little bit different. I always feel like I want to push it towards how I typically draw eyes, so like a very dark pupil. I often put like a band of a lighter reflective color at the very top, and then followed by like a darker color, and then we have like a very dark eye line, a very bright highlight, that kind of stuff. But Tighnari has a very much like two-tone color block, and then kind of like a white-ish pupil kind of center. So I don't really want to mess around with that because I feel like it is very integral part of his design. So I'm not gonna fiddle with that too much, but it does make him very easy to doodle because he kind of follows like my derp style in terms of like how I do very quick doodles for eyes. I kind of do the darker upper half, a lighter under half, and then a very much just a stark highlight and or white pupil, I guess you could put it, in the very center of the eyes, and it makes it very easy for me to doodle characters like that. So because it's been a while since I've used alcohol markers, I do want to revisit using them a little bit more, not like specifically in the sketchbook, because I do think that even though it took the markers very well, it's not my favorite paper to use when working with alcohol markers. I do think that the notebook paper that I use in like my notebooks that I treat as a sketchbook, I do like the paper's consistency for markers just a smidge more. I think the blending is just like slightly smoother, and it's a little bit less speckly in a way. So this paper did handle the marker very well. I'll show you guys like the bleed through, I think at the very end, so you guys can see it. And I think next week's Monday video, we will be covering up that backside. I haven't decided on how exactly I want to do that. I might just stick a sticker paper behind there and do something else. We might use like acrylic markers, or maybe I'll do post-it notes or something. But I want to cover the backside so that we can treat the next spread as like a full spread rather than two halves, as sometimes I do whenever I have like significant amount of bleed through from alcohol markers or some other medium that has bled through to the other side. So even though I found the blending fairly easy and it was very nice to kind of get like a fairly good smooth transition, I did take a little bit too much of like a drastic approach. You can kind of see like I added more of a turquoise kind of tealish color to the bottom of Tighnari's hair. I also keep forgetting how to pronounce his name, so I apologize if I've been pronouncing his name like entirely wrong throughout the entire video. I know some people call him like Tighnari, and I know that's technically incorrect, but I think the way I'm pronouncing is not entirely correct either, so I do apologize about that. But he does have kind of like a gradient or like colored ends to his hair, so I wanted to make sure to somehow incorporate that color still, and I wanted to transition into more of like a gray, and then I tried to transition it to more of like a neutral black. But every artwork that I've seen of him, there's a little bit more of like a warmer and or like brown undertone. I know it's like up to probably the artist's choice on how you want to depict typically like very dark hair. Maybe if it's black, you might lean it more towards blue for highlights, or maybe you want to be warmer so it's more towards brown or green or whichever. Because even for like my OCs, Kaisen and Moriko, both of them actually have black hair, but I always draw Moriko with hints of green instead of like neutral colors or even like blue or purple. And then for Kaisen, I always lean it towards more purple, and usually his highlights are reflecting more of like blue. Obviously the lighting situation will change that more drastically, but if I'm doing like very neutral lighting or just doing something where I don't really have to take those into consideration, then I oftentimes will associate, you know, Kaisen's hair with a little bit more blue, even though his hair is black. And then same thing for Moriko, where it's like hers will be a little bit more dark greenish rather than just like fully black. But in general, if you had to describe their hair, I would say their hair is black. But because of that, for Tighnari's hair, I ended up like layering kind of like a sandy beigeish color over top of his hair to kind of like knock back the value, because I wanted the highlights to be on the left hand side of the page, and then we have our darker colors towards the right hand side. So I wanted to knock as much of the white of the page out. So I ended up, like I said, using that sandy color, and then hopefully it also pushes it to be a little bit warmer. And in terms of like layering, I tried my best to use more of like the brush strokes with the brush nib to kind of give a little bit more texture here and there, especially where the hair was supposed to transition from one color to another, so that we don't have that really stark difference between something that wasn't unblended. You can kind of get a little bit of the gist of it by having the strokes kind of blend physically together rather than visually having a very smooth gradient. Because if you look much closer to his hair, you can kind of see that it's not perfectly blended, but it doesn't look too bad from afar as long as I have a little bit of texture covering it up and giving that illusion of one, value and shape, but also kind of covering up the fact that my gradation was not too smooth. But I do think it would be fun to do either another like ASMR or maybe like a long form session where I can do an alcohol marker drawing with you guys. It's been a while since I've been able to do a long form, and I have run into a bit of a conundrum, and I don't know how many people are very familiar with like mics. So I forget which video it was that people said there was an audio problem. So one was when I was exporting the audio, the final version apparently had a lot of like crackling and or like these fuzzy staticky noise, which was not in my actual file, which I found strange that the export had it. But another thing I noticed, and this might be like the reason why as well, is the fact that my mic has been acting up very, very strangely. So before, when I would like record voiceover, I would have my gain about like half or just above half, and then that will make myself like audible enough that I'm not peaking the mic. Right now I have it like way under half. It's about like 1/4 of the way, and I'm already peaking the mic, which really sucks. And then when I'm recording ASMR videos, I usually turn the gain all the way up. And I would like lower my fan noise. I have like a noise gate, and I think I have one more thing that's like on my mic settings that helps to reduce the amount of noise that's in my room. And it's been working like this for like, I think I've been using that kind of setup for more than a year, probably 2 years at this point. And then I used to use like a different mic for the ASMR as well prior to that for probably another 2-3 years-ish before moving to this mic. But this mic has been acting up very weirdly. I cannot turn the gain up all the way anymore, and when I was recording ASMR videos, I have to turn it way below half, like similar to how I'm like using the what is it called? The voiceover right now. So I think I might have to get a new mic because I was reading online that it might be the cord or maybe I'm crossing of wires and stuff. So I've tried everything that I could and nothing has fixed it. And now I'm really thinking that it might be the port in my mic itself, and I'm not proficient enough to know how to replace and or fix it. So I'm gonna look into maybe getting a new mic. I might get the exact same model, unfortunately, but it's like something that I'm just very used to. But I want to be able to comfortably make ASMR videos again, or even just like these normal talking videos. And I would like to make one that's like more, what is it called? Like a long form one. And I don't really want the audio to be really messed up while I'm doing that for, let's say, if it's like a 4 to 5 hour session. I don't want the audio to be borked the entire time. So yeah. Please bear with this mic for now. I will look into getting a new mic very, very soon. It might be more towards the new year in terms of just like how shipping will work because the holiday season does get very, very busy. So I don't want to accidentally buy a mic for it to get lost. So I might wait and hold off a little bit. Hopefully this audio isn't like too bad. But we are done with the coloring portion. You can kind of see that a lot of my lines are actually kind of missing. We don't really have that pop from the line art. So at this stage, I am actually going to go back to my swatch book and we are going to pick out a new line art color because I want my lines to pop enough from our already laid down colors, I guess, but I don't want to lose all of my orange lines either because that kind of defeats the point. I want the orange lines to kind of be soft enough around the face. So I'm going to leave some of those present still, but then we're going to darken up like a fair amount of the lines regardless because Tighnari's hair is like very much dark and part of his outfit has like some darker areas that might need a little bit of contrast. So we're just going to do that. And right away, I usually start with the eyes. Because I like having them kind of like the forefront of the face and like where I want your eyes to typically be drawn to. So I like to darken up, first of all, like the eye line area and around the iris. Now, like I said, Tighnari's eyes are very much like very simple two-tone and then the highlight in the center. So I didn't really want to add, like I said, like the dark band at the very top where I would have like the highlight and the pupil typically meet. So there is a little bit less contrast that I would like to put for his eyes. I know I could make it more stylized, but typically for fan art, especially more recent years, I like to still keep the essence of the character's design as they were intended, but still try to translate it into my style. I think I've talked about this before where some people might, I think like me included, especially when I was younger, where you would use the style as like the crutch of like why you don't draw things a certain way. And some characters have very unique like eye designs, like I mentioned earlier. Let's say like Kokomi. If you did the normal standard shoujo eyes, you can definitely do that. There's like nothing wrong with it. But if you did that for every character that you drew, even though they all have like unique eye shapes and unique irises and stuff, it might kill the character's design a little bit. So I like to try my best to keep at least some part of it intact, like I mentioned earlier. And like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with like wanting to do that, but I think it's good to have the ability to be able to translate your style, or I guess that like that type of character eyes design or whatever of like a very unique kind of look into your style, so that you yourself have enough variety and diversity and like skill level, I guess, to interpret a character like that. But I think that's it for the marker portion of today's little spread. So I think the darker lines definitely help a lot. I personally really like when I add the lines at the very end that kind of help push the line work and add that contrast. I think overall it just kind of makes the whole piece look a little bit more uniform and put together. because when I leave it at the state where it was just the orange lines, it just looked unfinished to me. So having those darker green lines and layering with the orange kind of gives it more of that black look almost. So it kind of really helps the piece come together. Now, I bought these acrylic gel pens. I'll talk about this in a future video if I decide to make a video about it, but I'm using this to kind of act as a gel pen and do a little bit of highlights. I haven't done this for artwork in a super long time because my experience of using these white gel pens have always been a nightmare. Maybe I'll talk about that in like a different video when I talk about these acrylic gel pens that have been very popular recently, especially for like YouTube shorts, or like artists have been using it for doodles in their sketchbooks and stuff. So I got very curious. I'll talk about it next time though. But the remainder of today's video, and hence why we have extra time despite finishing our main drawing of our spread, I wanted to do a little bit of sketching at the very end to fill up the rest of this particular spread. I didn't want to do more alcohol marker drawings because I do have doodles or drawings that I like on this other side, and I didn't really want to paste a sticker sheet right away. So we're just going to go ahead, use our Unidye color lead in the color blue, and I'm using my High-Tech C Coletto, I guess like a multi-pen, but because I do have the pencil component in this particular multi-pen, I have a pencil version that I can use, which really helps me whenever I want to do like sketching and stuff. So this is one of my favorite leads to use for sketching, especially like in the sketchbook I found. It's just very creamy feeling, so it's very easy for me to really darken up my lines or shade. So we're just gonna fill up this particular side of our spread with 2 more doodles. I didn't really have too much energy to really tackle his entire outfit. So first, we're just going to start off with a simple headshot, and then to fill the remaining space, I just wanted to draw something very cute. So I decided to draw him with like a stack of books and or paper, and he just looks very happy and very cute. So I don't know, I think this is just how I view him. I know he's a little bit more of a not exactly cutesy per se, but I like this type of character typically, and like I said, his design is like one thing that I really love about his character. So being able to draw him, I don't know, I've doodled him a lot, I think, in previous sketchbooks because of his very cute design, despite his more academic, more logical brain, I guess maybe I could say it. So yeah, kept this like the doodles pretty simple. I ended up just darkening some of the lines to give it a little bit more context of everything, but I didn't really flesh like anything out too much of his outfit. Like I mentioned, the shading here and there, some outlines for like the stack of paper, shaded his hair so we give that a little bit more contrast, and I think that's it for today's little doodling session right after our marker drawing. Hopefully you guys don't mind this little spread. I just really wanted to draw him, so I'm taking you guys along with me. We'll see what we'll do for next week. I do have plans to do literally the direct page after this, so I'll show you guys the bleed through as well, because it's quite significant despite this paper being fairly thick, and I think it's because I was trying to blend as much as I could. And here's like what it looks like, but we'll cover this up and maybe do like another sketching session of some sort, maybe with just graphite and real-time talking. We'll see. One last thing, I'm moving my little protective sheets to the next spread just to make sure that things don't accidentally smudge while I close my sketchbook. It's mostly for the graphite and pencil work, but I think that's it for today's video. I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!